Hey guys, in this series of videos I'll be designing and 3D printing a hydraulic arm. I'll be detailing my process so you can see how I did it. Cool, so let's jump into Fusion. So in Fusion the first thing I do is create a rectangle which will form the basis of the first part of the arm. I'm planning on having struts which are connected to syringes so that I can make the arm move. You see here I select a side and press D. This is so I can see the length of the side and change it later if I want to. Here I change it to 150. At the moment I'm just looking at the rectangle and deciding whether it's in proportion or not. For the struts that support the syringes and connect the pieces together, I'm planning on using Lego crossbeams. This is because they are thin, light and also quite strong. As you can see here, I think the 40mm is slightly too wide, so I double click on the measurement and type in 35 instead. Sometimes this happens when you're designing things. You can type in measurements you think will be correct, but they just don't look right. Now I have the rectangle looking exactly how I want it, I can move on to the next step. I want to make the corners rounded. I do this by going to the sketch menu, selecting circle and then selecting 2-point circle. I drag down from the top side of the rectangle. I use a 2-point circle to make sure that the sides of the rectangle are touching the circumference of the circle. I then use the select tool to make sure there are no gaps. I select the 2-point circle again and repeat this on the other side. The next thing I need to do is make two smaller circles inside the circles I just drew to fit the struts once the piece is extruded. I'll make this circle 5mm because that's the diameter of the Lego strut. I then do the same on the other side, but I make the diameter 5.2mm because I realise the strut needs room to move. I then go back to the first circle I drew and change it to 5.2 as well. The next thing I want to do is create a border around the inside of the shape. So I select circle. You can do this by just pressing C instead of going into the sketch menu and drawing a circle from the center point I've been using before. I draw the circle to the first circle I drew, seal that size and add 2mm to it. This is so I can get a good border around the edge. I then do the same process on the other side. I'm creating a border so that I can have a zigzag pattern inside the shape. This zigzag pattern will mean I'll be able to have gaps when I extrude the shape. These gaps will mean I'll use less material when 3D printing and it will look better. The next thing I do is create two lines down the side of the shape. I then finish the zigzag pattern. The next thing I need to do is create the place for where the struts that hold the syringes will sit. I do this by seeing where I want them to be, then drawing a circle of 15mm. Then inside that circle I'll draw another circle of 5.2mm because this is the diameter of the struts. I use a clever technique here of drawing a line from the centre of the bigger circle to the centre of the circle I just drew. This allows me to see the exact distance between the centre of the bigger circle and the centre of the circle I just drew. I then draw that same line on the other side of the same size. This lets me know where the circle will be on the other side if it's even. Once this line has been drawn, I can then draw a 15mm circle and a 5.2mm circle from the end of it, just like on the other side. When I've done that, I select the line I used as a guide and delete it. My next step is to select all the parts I want extruded. I use the select tool and press shift click to do this. Once I've selected all the parts, I press E and type in 5mm because that's how much I want it extruded. Once I press OK, I've got my shape. This is the first shape complete, so it's time to move on to the next one. But first I select the whole shape, press Ctrl C to copy it and then press Ctrl V to paste it and move it to the side. This is an unnecessary step, but I just like the way it looks. I then start a new sketch and select the face I want to draw on. This section of the arm will be a trapezium rather than a rectangle, so I use that shape. I then draw a rectangle underneath the trapezium because once extruded this will form a tab which will slide into the base. I make sure the height of this rectangle is 7mm because that's the height of the base. I then draw a boundary and zigzag pattern. I next draw a circle of 5.2mm so that it can fit the Lego struts. I select all the pieces I want extruded and press E and type in 5mm. You can see here that I've used the chamfer feature, which you can do by pressing C, to make all the sides rounded. I use the Ctrl C, Ctrl V keys to copy and paste the piece. However, I then realise that there's no place for the strut that holds the syringe to sit, so I do a circle. So I go back to the sketch, do a circle of 15mm, and then do a circle of 5.2mm inside. I again select all the pieces I want and press extrude and get the same shape as before. Here it is complete, and now time to move on to the base. I start a new sketch and draw a rectangle of the correct size. I then draw two smaller rectangles which will fit the tabs created in the last piece. Then I go to Arc, 3-point arc. Here I'm creating a point which will connect to the syringe, allowing the base to turn. In the middle of the base, I'm planning on having a raised circle which will be connected to a bearing. This will allow the base to move freely. This bearing will then be connected to another base, which instead of 3D printing, I'll create out of wood. I find the centre of the base and draw a circle of 8mm. This is the inside diameter of the bearing. I then draw a circle of 10mm. This is slightly wider than the inside diameter of the bearing. I do this so the bearing has something to rest on and can turn freely. The next thing I do is draw a border around the inside of the base and do a diagonal pattern. After I've extruded it, this is how it looks. Okay guys, thanks for watching and stay tuned for the next episode.